How good do you want to be at Smash Ultimate? Do you want to be competitive in your area? Maybe even a top player worldwide? Or maybe you just want to be good enough to win some online matches and have fun in your downtime. Whatever your goals are, I can't imagine anyone playing this game and not wanting to get better by some degree. But the next question is, okay, how do you do it? What is the best way to get better at the game? And the answer is, practice. No, but seriously, I think we can all agree that while practicing is important, the most important part is how you practice. Should you practice against real people or CPUs? How much time should you spend in training mode or watching your replays? How much time should you devote to watching the top players versus playing the game yourself? This may surprise you, but none of those questions have a straightforward answer. There are times when it's better to play against CPUs than to play against real people. Depending on how you're doing, you might want to spend more time playing and forgetting about your replays altogether. Or maybe you'd improve faster if you stopped playing and watched someone who knows your character better than you do. Your goal shouldn't be to find the most optimal way to practice. And for that matter, it shouldn't be to practice X amount of hours every day either. What you need to do to improve is constantly changing, and there's no surefire way to know exactly what you should focus on in order to get the highest returns. That's why if you want to get better, the first thing you need to do is fix your mindset. You need to realize that so long as you're playing and having fun, you're getting better. There are going to be days when you destroy every player online and other days where you lose against seemingly everyone you play against. That's just basic statistics. However, if you're genuinely trying to improve, your mean results will gradually get better. And then who knows? Maybe you could start as a casual player and wind up becoming one of the best in the world. Regardless of results though, I'm here to help you figure out what you personally can do to improve, and what you can do later when you reach that next level. So before I begin, let's talk about your brain, because without it, you turn into a Zelda main. Your results typically rely on the following 4 factors: how well you know your character, how well you know the opponent's character, how good you are at figuring out what you're doing that works or doesn't, and what your opponent does that works or doesn't. The first 2 factors can be summed up as matchup knowledge, whereas the latter 2 can be thought of as your ability to adapt. When you're learning something new, it activates the hippocampus, the part of your brain used in developing long-term memory. When it comes to video games, that message is sent to the cerebellum, which is responsible for hand-eye coordination. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, which is used when you're put into new situations and you're trying to figure out what to do in that situation. As you can imagine, there's a lot of information that's being processed all over your brain. And when your opponent's move can come out within 1/10 of a second, your brain can get pretty overloaded. That's why it's your job to make it as easy for your brain as possible to calm down and think about the situation without as much static interfering with your match. A process which I call fluency. You see, when you develop a new skill, your synapses are trying to create new connections. And the more they see the same situations, the more those regions myelinate to make the transmission of electrical signals easier. Basically, neurons that fire together, wire together. Or in even simpler terms, the more you do something, the better you get at it. The more times you practice a combo, the less mental energy it takes, which lets you focus more on how your opponent is reacting and what your next options are. How good you are with your character and how good you are at dealing with the other characters really does come down to repetition, repetition, repetition. So then, if it just takes repetition to learn a matchup, then does it matter if you play against CPUs or real people? Congrats! We've made it to our first "it depends" answer. So first of all, if you want to beat your opponent, it helps to have a main, a single character who you use more than anyone else. You're more than welcome to use multiple characters or even half the roster if you feel like it, but the more you use one specific character, the more fluency you'll develop and you'll end up getting better results in the long run. That's half the matchup equation. The other half is who your opponent uses. Obviously, real people are typically better than CPUs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're better for practice. CPUs are a great way to learn the fundamentals of a character. Let's take Mario for instance. By playing against Mario CPUs, you'll develop a greater fluency of how quickly he runs, how fast his moves come out, the trajectory of his fireballs, and other things that make Mario who he is. There is no shame in saying, I'm having trouble with this matchup, so I'm going to practice against a CPU so that I can get a better feel for the character overall. That being said though, a CPU doesn't understand the meta like a person does. A computer will come at you hard the entire game, whereas a person can sit back, analyze, and adapt to put you into new traps and combos. Eventually, you'll want to drop CPUs and start playing against real people who can adapt to what you're doing, but only after you feel comfortable with the character at a fundamental level. It's fine if you want to play against real people without knowing the opponent's character all too well, but if the opponent knows the matchup way better than you won't be able to adapt, and you'll learn basically nothing from the interaction. I talk about this more on my video on why getting bodied is bad for you, but let me go back to the brain. You know all those fancy brain processes that I mentioned earlier? Well, all of those processes get inhibited by a chemical called cortisol. Now, this chemical was not intended for 21st century problems. This chemical was created way back when humans were in constant danger, and if a hungry lion popped out, we needed to be able to shut off everything in our body so that more blood flow could be used in helping us get the crap out of there. Now, in our modern world, our problems are different, but the chemicals are the same. Now, instead of pumping out cortisol whenever you're face to face with a predator, we get it in other stressful situations, like taking a test, paying your bills, and yes, getting bodied in the middle of a game. The release of cortisol prevents you from all kinds of cerebral functions, like remembering what you're supposed to do in certain situations or thinking about how you're going to adapt and turn things in your favor. This is why if you're ever playing against someone way beyond your skill level, at least online, you probably won't gain anything from rematching them, and your time would be best suited playing against someone else. If you're playing against someone in real life though, it can be useful to play against someone way better than you if they're willing to give you advice on how to get better. But remember, just because they're good at the game doesn't necessarily mean they're a good coach. The best way to get the most out of your training, in my opinion, is to play against someone who challenges you but doesn't dominate you. Okay, so how do you find someone like that? Well, I've got bad news.
Elite Smash!
This is probably going to be controversial, but the best way to find somebody close to your skill level is more often than not just to play against people on Quick Play or Elite Smash. When you're first starting out with the character, the system is going to have very little to evaluate you with, so it might take a while before you match up with someone on your level. But eventually, you'll get matched up with people who fit the criteria you need, someone who can challenge you without being way out of your skill level. Not only that, but the matchmaking system is super quick. You'll get 10 times as many opponents on Quick Play than you'd get in arenas or tourneys, and you get to decide after each game whether or not you want to rematch them. Obviously, there are flaws with that system. Aside from the lag, there are people who spam and teabag and play in all kinds of trashy ways that would get them beat up in real life. Even after playing a couple dozen matches, the system won't always match you up with someone close to your skill level, but I still believe that you're more likely to find people on your level this way than if you did online tourneys or Smash arenas. If we're talking about people in real life though, there are lots of different factors that could play here. How strong is your local scene? Do you have friends who play? Do you have any siblings who are around your skill level? I know that some high schools have a Smash Bros club. Maybe you could trick your friends into joining with you. You'd be surprised how many top players got to the position they're at by playing around with friends or family. But just know that if that isn't an option for you, there's still the online method which works pretty well, at least for the most part. Then there's your replays. How often should you watch them? How often should you be watching people who are better than you with the character that you're using? Again, there's no hard and fast rule about this, but I would say that if you ever get completely bodied by someone who seemed to know how to adapt to everything you did, try saving a replay and watching it the next day after you've had some time to move on. Maybe watch some videos from top players in your downtime before bed or when you're in the bathroom at work instead of doing your job. If there's ever a time when you want to get better but don't feel like playing against other people, hop into training mode and watch a combo guide. You'd be surprised what you can learn by mindlessly juggling a computer that doesn't move. Basically, feel free to make time for videos and replays every once in a while, but I personally wouldn't want it to take precedence over you actually playing the game. Here's the most important part though. If you don't get anything else out of this video, I want you to remember this one important thing. If you want to get better, you need to have fun. What? You get better by having fun? Who knew? Yeah, I know you've heard it before, but there are actual pragmatic reasons behind this aside from the fact that you spent $60 on this game for that exact purpose. When you're having fun, you're activating the frontoparietal attention network, a neural network responsible for, shocker, your attention. This means that more of your cerebral functions responsible for learning can activate, which means that they'll get stronger in processing new information, which means that you'll get better at the game more quickly than if you'd rematched the guy who teabags on you every time you make a mistake. That being said though, there are still some people who treat this like a job. They want to get better, they want to be at the top of their power rankings, so they say, I'm just going to practice whether I want to or not. Sure, they get better, for a while, until they stop playing altogether. Look, there are all kinds of people who have all kinds of goals who do all kinds of practicing who get better at all kinds of different speeds. You cannot compare yourself to other people, because guess what? Your brain is as similar to that person as your face is to theirs. The speed at which you get good is determined by all kinds of brain functions, from how it was organized when you were born to the myelinated regions that developed because of your individual life journey. And your motivations are just as different. There are some people who can play 8 hours a day and never feel fatigued. If that's you, great. If not, don't worry about it. What you need to worry about is getting better at your own pace, because if you do, you'll improve way faster than if you tried to be someone else. Remember, even MK Leo loses to people. Sometimes he loses games, and sometimes he loses entire sets. Imagine you being the guy who took that set. Just imagine how good that would feel. And the good news is, that can be you. So start practicing and have fun. So, what do you think? Did you find anything you can use for your own practice? Are there any other ways you think will help you get better? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.